or I don't want to kind of, admit these things. I definitely don't want to cry on camera.
And literally sat down on the bench on a little dock there and said, I don't know if I can do this.
That's what you bring to your brand. It's not just like, I have the best product ever. Like, nobody cares.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this conversation for a couple of reasons. One, I find you to be so dynamically skilled, and we're going to get into a bunch of different topics that I feel are applicable to really anybody and everybody, which is great. But second, I also have a personal interest in a lot of the things that make you, like branding and completing an Ironman and being very successful on YouTube. So really excited to connect with you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be the third guest on our podcast.
I really hope I live up to the legacy of the earlier guests and all of that right there.
No, you will. You will. So my first question is, who is Shirley Jump? But I want to first provide a little context into how we met. So back in, I think it was end of March, beginning of April, 2025, I went to a networking event at the Tampa Club. I don't know if you remember this.
I do, yeah.
And there was about 30 to 40 people there. And everybody had to go around the room and answer a few questions. What's my name? Where do I work? I think one of them was, what do you love about living in Florida? If you could travel anywhere, what would be, your destination of choice and why? And so you're getting a lot of generalized responses. And this is like your 45-second elevator pitch in a way. At least that's kind of the way I thought of it. And it got to you, and you answered the questions, but then you also spoke to, here's what I've done, here's what I've accomplished, here's what makes me me, here's an event that we're putting together. And afterwards, I'm making a mental note, I'm connecting with that person. Chris on your team was there as well. And we ended up talking for 45 minutes about a lot of things we'll get into today. And I just thought your introduction and the emphasis you put on speaking to who you were influenced me in a way that now has led to us being partners in business. Right. We've sponsored events. There's a lot of awesome things. And I just think it's almost a lost art. Like when you have a chance to tell people who you are, how do you do that? And you do it in such a unique way. So a lot of pressure. Who is Shirley Jump?
In 45 seconds,
well,
right?
You don't
or
you
30
Yeah.
So the elevator pitch is that I'm a New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Amazon bestselling author who's published in 24 countries, 87 books. I've sold 8 million copies. But I'm also a brand and marketing and social media platform building person because everything goes together when you're building a brand, right? And I'm part of Building Success Productions. It's a company that Tommy Whitehead and I started together because I helped him build his social media platform before the first major Building Success Summit. And we saw how successful it was and we wanted to bring it to other businesses. So that's like the elevator pitch. But the question about who is Shirley Jump is always an interesting question to me because there is Shirley Jump, the author, who is one person to the world. And then there's just regular Shirley, right? There's just me. And the regular me, like most creatives, is insecure, scatterbrained. I've got lists everywhere. I'm running in 600 directions at one time. And I never see that success as at all what everybody else sees it as. It's a continual striving to be better, stronger, live up to whatever that Shirley Jump image is. And one of my favorite stories to tell about being Shirley Jump was I went into a bookstore early in my career. It was shortly after I had hit the New York Times list. So I was just like, I'm all that, right? Like go in a bookstore and I literally see a woman sitting on the floor in the section reading my book. And I'm like, oh, I wrote that.
What
She's
are the
like,
odds?
oh my God, you're Shirley Jump. She just freaks out. She runs over, she hugs me, she gets me to sign it. And I was just like, I'm Shirley Jump, right? And then I go to my son's school, and I was the room mom. And I walk in the room, and I've got snacks and crafts, and they're all like, Derek's mom. And I was like, wait, this matters more. Like, that was a great moment where this lady was making a big deal out of me, and it's the kind of thing that authors all dream of, like people running down the bookstore, so excited to see you. But when I went into the school, and I was Derek's mom, I was like, this is what matters. And it created a shift inside of me every time I thought about that story, that the persona that you become when you become known, and I don't even consider myself known, but when some people know who you are, is completely different than who you actually want to be and who you are at your heart. So every decision that I make comes from the position of being regular Shirley, not this person that
Yeah.
has been created out of accolades.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that is something that isn't talked about enough, is like, I'm just a normal person.
Right.
Yes, I've accomplished a lot and I've been involved in a lot of successful things, but behind all of that is a regular, insecure person that struggles with things, that's a mom, that's trying to balance life, and that is very challenging within itself. And so to kind of piggyback off your explanation of who is Shirley Jump and just everything that you've accomplished, I want to start with the beginning days, because you started at a very young age,
Yes.
writing and getting into the industry that you're in today. And so what was the journey like, going from interest or passion to then landing your first big job?
So I am a proud charter member of Overachievers Anonymous. So when I was young, I decided I wanted to be a writer as soon as I learned how to read. Like, I read some books I didn't like the endings of, so I would recreate those endings in my own little handwritten books with little construction paper covers and stuff. And then when I was 11, my parents sponsored a family from Laos. And this was back in 1982, 1983, around there, early 80s. And it was very weird to have 3 people in my house that did not speak English. There was no Google Translate. There was no internet even. And it was a very life-changing experience to meet people who had lived a life that I could never understand, escaped communists, watched beheadings in their streets. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
So I wrote an essay about it and sent it off to the local paper, which was about the size of the Tampa Bay Times. And they bought it, and they ran a story on it, and they put my little picture in there. And it was just like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. And I decided, all right, I want to go into TV. I want to be Jane Pauley, who was famous on the Today Show at the time. And I called the editor of the local weekly, because when I asked the paper that interviewed me if they would hire me, they just laughed at me, right? Like,
Yeah, you're
going
11.
to the Tampa Bay Times, I'm 11 years old, I want a job. But back in those days, everything was done by Dropbox. So you would type up your story and leave it in the Dropbox at the local pharmacy, and the editor would come and collect them. So I never saw the editor in person. And when I called the local weekly and I pitched a story idea to him, and it was a story about a local no nukes group that my mother's church had been involved in. And he's like, so are you in high school? And I was like, oh, yeah. And I was not. I was in 8th grade. And he's like, okay, you can write it up and drop it off. We'll see if we run it. And he hired me. And I produced a story every single week, sometimes more than one. I became the town reporter for my small town. And when I was 14, my mother finally let me go to the company Christmas party. And they were like, you're how old?
Yeah.
But then I got a job at the local daily when I was 16. I kept pushing and pushing and pushing to work there. And they hired me. And when I was 16, still in high school, sophomore, junior, I was producing 2 stories a day, 365 days a year, whether there was 2 stories or not, because this was a small town, 15,000 people. There was not a lot of news. And that taught me a couple of things. It taught me that there's no such thing as writer's block. Like any creative job, there's days when it's easy and days when it's hard, and you just keep showing up. You know, sometimes I'd write really great stories, and sometimes I'd write meh stories, and sometimes I would hate my job completely. But it also taught me that I didn't want to be that person. I remember calling the widow of my high school history teacher after he died of a heart attack at the wheel of the car when they were on family vacation, and being like, so how do you feel? You know, like, and just being that scummy person that called another family after their grandma was killed in a hit and run after coming home from bingo, and just thinking, I don't like who I have to be to do this. And the day I quit was the day that I was covering the local finance committee meeting. Again, it's a town of 15,000. Our budget was not like $10 billion. It was not that big. And there was a $1,500 discrepancy. And the finance committee chairman, it was his first day there. And the rival reporter, who also happened to be a girl from the other major newspaper in the area, was like badgering him during the meeting. And he's like, I just don't know. I just started. And, you know, it's a small town. You know, he just got elected. He goes to the restroom during the break, and she walks in after him. And I looked at her and thought, I have no desire to be you. And I resigned. I did my story, I turned it in, and I just quit and started working for magazines, and then for like Chicken Soup for the Soul. I started selling essays, completely using my children's lives as a way to make money. I sold a lot of them to Chicken Soup for the Soul kind of books. And I still had this desire to write books. So I kept writing fiction, and it was horrible, and it kept getting rejected, and I was getting really frustrated. And then my very first book deal came about because of a newspaper article that I did. I interviewed a children's television star from Boston. No one outside of Boston has any idea who he was, but he had the #1 show in Boston for 18 years. And he says to me, listen, this publisher wants to do a book on me, and you were the only person that got everything right. Will you do the book for me? And I was like, okay. And that was my first book deal. And it just kind of kept growing from there. But as for fiction, I wrote 10 books in 8 years and kept getting rejected. I have at least 250 rejections from every publisher on the universe. And at the time, there was no ebooks. Ebooks were just starting when I sold my very first book. So they were still kind of like that, ugly thing you don't want to talk about because they had not become what they are today. And then the first book that I sold, it's a whole long story about just quitting and not having support and just giving up on myself. And then at the last minute, it was like kind of a movie ending where I got the call that they wanted to buy my book, and everything changed from there. Or it seems like it does, right? Like in the movies, it all goes off into the sunset and you become this major star and all of that. It's not really how it happens.
That's just one
job.
chapter.
Yeah, it's just one chapter. There's a lot of setbacks and there's still rejection even after you sell your books. But it was just a lot of hard work and a lot of not quitting, even when I was the only one that believed that I could do this. Literally the only one that believed that I could do this. So
it's incredible. Was it always a desire for you to write your own books and or become a ghostwriter even in the early days when you were younger, or did that evolve through the learnings and through the other jobs that you had?
Ghostwriting was also an accident. I had no intentions of doing that, but I was very good at mimicking other people's voices when I wrote. And there was a guy who was one of the regular contributors to Antiques Roadshow. He would go on all the time with antique books and be an expert on that. And he had a column in an antiquarian magazine, and he didn't want to write it anymore. So they came to me and said, will you write this? And so he would call me once a month, and we would talk it through, and I would write the column and just go from there because I learned how to sound like him. And that's where ghostwriting came from, and that deal with that the book about the children's television star. So all of it was just kind of things that I was in the right place for, and I realized that there was more steady income in that. There's no books, writing fiction is not a steady income job ever for anybody. I don't care who you are, how long you've been in this industry. It's never steady income. It's completely unpredictable. But
unless a movie's made.
Yeah, even if a movie's made.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
So movies, a whole other, the whole industry is very weird the way it works. But the ghostwriting and the nonfiction writing for magazines, and then ultimately I started working for marketing agencies and a publicist and doing a lot of things like that. That was steady income. There's a continual need for business stories. So that's where I went with the magazines, was business to business magazines, because people will always need to know how to do a 401k plan for their employees. They won't always need to know how to fix their hair, like the beauty industry. A couple of the major national magazines I worked for that were in the beauty industry or the self-help industry fell apart. But business to business is always there. So I started working there and then doing these other ghostwriting and marketing and publicity kind of stories and things that I worked for. And those became steady, reliable income. So that's how I ended up in that. And that just grew my reputation. And my agent, once I finally had an agent that believed in me, she would start recommending me to clients that had sold a book based on their celebrity but didn't want to write it, so they would hire me to write it. And all of these kind of things sort of mushroomed out of always saying, yes, I can do that, whether I knew how to do it or not, and just figuring it out.
Which seems to be a very common thing in your journey is I'm just going to try this and figure out as I go, and I'm okay with failure because it's going to make me better. I'll learn from it, and then it leads to other business opportunities. Right. Now, you talked a little bit about a ton of setbacks and a ton of books that never got actually brought to life, right? Or, failures, if you will. Is there a specific moment that you can remember, like your roadblock moment, when you were truthfully at a point where you didn't know if this is what you wanted to keep doing?
So that was my quitting moment. So back in, oh my gosh, I can't even remember when it was, 2001, 2002, I had written the 10 books in 8 years that hadn't sold, and I'd had an agent for a few years. She had sold a nonfiction book for me at auction, so that had done really well. but my fiction just was going nowhere. And I just kept trying to write faster and faster and faster, trying to provide what they wanted. And I had a book that had gone to HarperCollins and been rejected, but then I entered it in a contest, and an editor at HarperCollins read the first chapter and said, I want to see the full. But my agent said, I won't represent that. It has been there before. They've already rejected it. Their rules are you can't resubmit something that's been rejected. I just don't think this is your best work. And she basically told me she didn't think I had what it took to write fiction. And I had already sent the book in on my own, under my own name, without any representation, because I'd won the contest, so I was allowed to do that. But when my agent sent me that letter saying, I don't think you have what it takes, I had this accumulation of years and years and years of rejections, of coming like this close and then not making it, and fighting for every writers conference I went to, for every class I took, for every book I bought on a how-to, because at home I didn't have a whole lot of support. I didn't really have anybody going, yeah, you can do this, go after your dream. I had more like, this is what's making money, do this, and clearly you're not good at this, so don't do that.
Yeah.
So it was always me saying, okay, I can do it. And I had finally gotten to the point when my agent, the person that's supposed to represent you to the world as this amazing person, was like, don't know if you can do this. When I got that letter, I just was like, that's it. And I quit. And I threw everything away that I had ever written. And I wiped my hard drive, and I put my entire writing life into 3 hefty bags and just had like a little nervous breakdown / pity party in my office, because I was like done. I was like, I'm going to go get a real job. I am not going to do this anymore. And I had been pretty successful at that point. I had been a Wall Street Journal bestseller with my second nonfiction book, which was a how-to. And I had sold about 3,000 articles for about, 750 publications around the world. I'd worked for Chicken Soup. I've done a lot of things that were quite successful, but it wasn't where I wanted to be successful. And so I quit. And I spent a week on my couch just watching like Oprah and not doing anything at all and just feeling sorry for myself. Now, luckily, the day I quit was the day after my computer the day after my computer backs up to an external hard drive. So I had everything still, even though I had wiped my hard drive, it was all there. So when I got a letter a week later from HarperCollins, I was about to throw it away. And then my husband at the time said, well, maybe you should just read it. And I was like, you know what? I've been rejected enough. I'm just not even going to read this letter.
Yeah, I can't hear another.
They always say bad things in mail. They'll call you if they want to buy it. That's like how it works. They're like, hey, we want to buy your book. But if they don't want it, they're just like, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. But I ended up fishing it out of the trash and reading it. And it was basically a letter saying, you're not a deep, dark, angsty writer. You're actually a comedic writer. And if you can take this one scene that was funny in my book and turn this book into a romantic comedy, then we'll buy it. And it was a book about a recovering alcoholic hero who thought he had killed his own baby. So to say that this was a challenge to turn it into a romantic comedy is putting it mildly.
Yeah.
But I found a way to blend the emotion with the comedy, and I really buckled down in terms of studying structure and how books go together. And I rewrote that book, and I sent it back in. This was in June. I sent it back in October. And in the meantime, I had fired my agent that said I didn't have what it took. And I decided I would query one agent, just one, just to prove to myself that I sucked. And this happened to be Toni Morrison's agent. And she said, I like what you got. I'll represent you. We ended up ultimately parting ways when she retired, and I have a different agent now. But in December, I got the call from HarperCollins. We love this. We want to buy it. And it was just amazing. And that was like 24 years ago. That first book came out in 2003. And that same book my first agent said, I don't think you have what it takes. That book went on to win the Booksellers Best Award for Best Romance of the Year.
Wow.
So I was like, haha.
Yeah, gotcha.
I did learn a lot and I did improve a lot. So she did have a point when she told me that, but I did work hard to write much better.
Would you say that your roadblock moment ended up becoming your breakthrough moment at the same time? Or is there a specific event that you're like, no, that was my breakthrough moment. This is when I know I made it. Or do you?
I don't ever feel like I made it, like never, because it's such a weird career. You know, like you can be at the top of your game and then have one thing go wrong and then you're not there anymore. And I have a million stories like that. And I don't want to ever feel like I made it. I remember being at a writer's conference with a very, very famous, very successful author who had made millions, had movies made of most of her books. This was back in most of her books had come out in the 80s and the 90s when that happened a lot. You know, there were a lot of like female-driven movies. And she says, I am very proud that I never have any editing. Nobody ever edits my books. They publish them as they are. And I was like, oh, I don't ever want to be that cocky that I know everything. Now, don't get me wrong. When an editor sends me a letter and says, change this and this and this, I'm just like, you didn't like it? What did I do wrong? You know, I feel like failure for a minute. But then I take a deep breath, look at it, and say, okay, yes, these changes will make a difference. These other 20% of the changes I don't feel, oh my God, are going to work, but this will work. So I always want to be better. I always want to achieve more. And setbacks are a natural part of this industry. I've had books that came out. I had a book that came out on 9/11, and I didn't sell any copies for a full quarter. And I wasn't going to focus on it. I wasn't going to market. I wasn't going to do anything. But that's something I could not control. And most of this industry is out of my control. So I just work on writing the best possible book I can at this moment in time and try to be better with the next one.
Love that. I'm curious, writing fiction, I mean, there has to be a very, very unique mindset around storytelling. And I'm sure there's so many influences that play a role in the ideas that you have. Is it a constant thing like throughout the day or week where you're going through a specific situation, you're like, oh, I could write a book on that?
Oh, I think that 7,000 times a day.
Okay.
And I used to keep like folders of ideas, and then I'd never look at them. Because what happens is they all filter into my head somewhere. And then when I sit down to work on something, all of a sudden, something comes out that I didn't expect. Like I have a book in the pile there that has a woman going to her husband's funeral, and she finds out he had another wife at the funeral because the other wife comes to the funeral. And then she gets home and there's a dog on the doorstep that she didn't even know her husband had. And this kind of like throws her entire life into chaos. And people are like, so where did that idea come from? I'm like, I don't know. I just started writing and this other wife walked in the room. And I was like, oh, that's a cool story idea, because it's all like cooking back there. But it's a constant process as well of refining and saying there's not enough here. There needs to be more here. Because a book, just like branding, just like anything that you do, is all about impact. What you do for work is all about impacting your customers, impacting their customers, and then impacting the community with what Elite does in giving back. And a book and branding and all of those things are the same way, because people make decisions based on emotion. So if you can tap into emotion in whatever you are creating, and that's what I'm constantly trying to do, then you can create something that is richer and better. The hard part about tapping into emotion is that it means going here to all those insecurities that you have, to all those anxieties and those worries and those traumas you've been through, and putting that into what you're doing, because that's what makes it authentic. That's what makes it vulnerable. And it's just not fun, and most of us don't want to do that. So.
Yeah. Now, if I were to reach out to you and say, Shirley, I want to write a book. I need your help. Here are the ideas that I have. Here's what I'm interested in. Like, what's like the first one or two maybe questions, or what does that like beginning process look like from thought and idea to, and I know we're going to do a little activity later, but from then, pencil to paper, or, fingers on the keyboard. Is there like a process you have that like helps you find your way into like, all right, here's where I think we can take these ideas that you have, or all this information that you have, written down, and put it into a story?
Well, first off, I tell everybody, keep your expectations low. There are 30 million books on Amazon. Books themselves don't make a lot of money. It's very, very rare. It's 1% of all books that make real money. Most books don't even sell more than a few hundred copies. But that's okay. A book, for nonfiction, particularly for my nonfiction clients, a book is about opening doors to speaking, to building a course, to creating a brand. It's a door opener. It is not a money maker necessarily. Sometimes it can be, but if you keep those expectations low and you see it as a marketing tool, then you're going to approach it in a different way. But fiction people really have this like heart like connection with, and they're like, well, this is my baby, and this is this, and I feel really close to it, and it's got to be this story of my heart. And I get that because I write fiction, and I've always felt that way about my books. But I also come at it from a business perspective. What is in it for the reader? This is something that somebody's going to sit down with one of these books, and they're going to spend $12 and 4 hours of their life reading this. And I'm going to be very grateful for that time if they get through the whole book and they've spent all that time with me. But that is a very valuable commodity that they're giving me. It's not the $12. It is the 4 hours of their life that they're not spending with their kid or their mom or their dying grandma. They are spending it with me. And no matter whether I'm writing a story or I'm writing a nonfiction book, there has to be an impact and something in it for the reader. Most people come at it from themselves when this is a product to the rest of the world, and you have to think about what are you delivering in return for their investment. And when you think about it that way, hopefully you go into it with more depth, with more meat, and more like, okay, I'm going to really talk about this particular issue, or I'm going to really delve deep into this character's insecurities.
Or you're okay with it changing a little bit for the purpose of having an impact on the reader versus it being something that you selfishly want them to know.
And that also has you right from a more emotional standpoint. Most of us can write car chases really easily, right? Like that's the good part. I got the gunfight going. Look at all these, fun, cool things that I put in. Like, it's like a movie completely made out of CGI, which you're just like, okay, that was all right. As opposed to one that has some real depth of character and where you're really rooting for people. That's what makes something like The Sopranos so really impressive and powerful, because there was such an emotional component to it that you as the viewer were just torn between, is Tony a bad guy? Is he a good guy? Like, I want him to live. I don't want him to die. And yet then he runs some poor guy over or sets his friend's restaurant on fire. Like, he's doing terrible things, but because you relate to him on an emotional level, you get hooked in. And that's the hard part to do, because that comes from writing from your gut.
Perfect transition into branding, because for businesses, I mean, storytelling is like at the essence, at the core of creating a brand and getting people to want to connect with that brand, which you have a lot of success in doing, not only with books, but also with YouTube, which we'll get into. How do you see it tying in with storytelling, and how has that storytelling helped us build the Elite Advantage podcast? And I'll backtrack a little bit. One of the best pieces of advice I ever received was, nobody's going to create relevancy better for yourself than you. And I think that is such an important thing that I constantly have to remind myself of. Like, all right, if I want the Elite brand to grow, then what am I doing to go out and create awareness around that? And you've been so helpful and such a great partner in helping us get our brand name out there more. For the listeners, just in 2 months, only with content that your production company and your mentoring has provided us, we've hit over 40,000 views on all our platforms. So this is just the beginning. I know we got a ton of exciting things ahead, but I think it's important to have the data to show, what you guys are able to do for us. And so, how did your use of storytelling help us build this podcast and by extension, the Elite Rewards brand?
Well, you've been a dream to work with, because you see that you are very keen to lean on other people's expertise, which is the entire point of the Elite Advantage podcast, right? Is interviewing these people that have been successful and saying, okay, how did you do it? And one of the things that we talked about early on when you guys were creating the podcast was that same concept of what's in it for the viewer. There are 20 bazillion podcasts out there. Why are people going to care about yours? And so when you sit down and you say, okay, what am I doing different? Where am I focusing this? How am I bringing my own relevancy, my own experience to the table? And one of the things that you've got that makes you unique is doing the Ironmans, right? Like, that's something that 1% of all of the athletes that are in running, biking, or swimming do. I mean, the stats are so low. It's like a couple 100,000 people a year that do an Ironman. And so that perseverance, that overcoming, that picking yourself up and going on and doing really hard things even when you think you can't do them, that's something that you bring to that podcast that makes that podcast unique to you, Wes, not just to the Elite brand, but to you. And so we're always trying to bring that out when we're talking with you about planning a podcast and then deciding what footage we're going to cut and what footage we're going to keep in, how we're going to do the questions. Like, all of those things are in the back of my mind as I'm working with you. But one of the things that I'm constantly looking for with the clients is, how do we bring out what makes them unique while also creating something unique in the marketplace that is continually filling up with content. Every single day there's more and more, and AI is only going to make it worse. They're just going to spit it out of ChatGPT. And while I think AI has its place in terms of making some of our jobs easier, I also think that unique heart component, that emotion that comes from admitting, like we just talked about with failure, admitting you failed and picked yourself up. Those kinds of things can't be created by AI. So when you find that core of what makes people tick, what makes you tick, that's what you bring to your brand. It's not just like, I have the best product ever. Like, nobody cares. People care about, how is this product and your information and your voice and your experience and your knowledge going to affect me? How is it going to help me make my life better, richer, happier, whatever they're looking for? And when you can nail that down, then you've created something that people will actually pay attention to and give you 40,000 views.
Yeah. You said something that I love, and it's that with AI, yes, it's going to help with content creation and time saving, and there's a ton of value that it already has and will continue to have, but there's going to be a heightened value on authenticity. I truthfully believe that as AI becomes more prevalent, authenticity will probably decrease, and so therefore there's going to be a lot more value. And I just want some authentic content. I just want to hear somebody talk authentically. I don't want to hear them read from a script. Nowadays, we get emails that I don't even know sometimes. Was that written by somebody or was that ChatGPT? Yeah. Is it a machine? Is that really you that I'm talking to? I know there's companies and different tools out there where you can literally have it auto respond to texts that you're getting. There's devices you can attach to your phone or your belt where it's picking up on everything you're saying and then it's telling you how to respond.
Right.
So yeah, I couldn't agree more that people are going to need and want to hear authentic, genuine voices. And I think that's where brands are going to win.
And that's the hardest part. I learned that when I did my YouTube channel. So we started off with this whole who was Shirley Jump thing. When I first started my YouTube channel, I was like, well, I'm Shirley Jump. I'm not going to admit that I screwed all these things up. I'm not going to admit that I'm scared. I'm just going to be this authority figure that teaches people how to write. And it didn't work. Like, it took a really long time. I think it took me a little over a full year to get 1,000 followers. Now, I was putting out good content, good craft content, good how-to content, but people were not relating to me. And I ended up hiring a coach because I needed like an outside voice. And she's like, why are you not talking about all this stuff you've gone through? Other people have done that. And I'm like, well, I don't want them to think less of me, or I don't want to kind of, admit these things. I definitely don't want to cry on camera. But the more that I did that, the more that I was like, you know what, I screwed up, or I got rejected. Like, I literally just released a video today that said, I just got a rejection last month for a book that I submitted through my agent. And it's not like, the golden doors open and everything is perfect after you sell a book or you hit the New York Times list. That's not how it works. And just that admission alone, people are like, oh, okay, so she's real. She's not just saying, I'm all this in a bag of chips. She's saying, this is hard. And I struggle with it. And the more that you can be that vulnerable and authentic with people, that's what they want to see. They don't just want to see the person that has it all, because we've seen enough of that on Instagram to realize that none of that is real. Yeah. And the real life is when, my cat jumps on my desk in the middle of my video and I get mad at him, and people are like, oh, she gets mad at her cat too. Like, just even those little things, people are like, okay, I feel like this is a real person who gets me. And I have to admit that I still struggle with it, because it's hard to take that persona and be myself and try to also be a voice of authority and teach people. I'm constantly trying to find that middle ground between being real and vulnerable, and yet also continuing to teach people, because I don't want to just be like sobbing on YouTube every day. Yeah. But I also want to bring people like real advice that they can take and use to make their writing lives easier. Show your best and hide the rest is a real thing that I think a lot of people struggle with, including myself. I mean, I have my own YouTube channel. It's in the infancy stages. It's not in the top 5% like yours is. But I also can relate to, there's a lot of things that I know I could speak on and share, but am I okay with people knowing that? Right. And I've heard it said so many times that when you do open up and you are transparent, you'll actually probably gain more than if you don't. Right. But it still is that like, but like, do I want people to know that I failed or that I struggled with all these other things? Right. I want them to know that look at me, Right. So, and there's also an oversharing point too, where there's 100%. Plenty of people on YouTube and TikTok that are just they lean way too hard into that, and it becomes their persona versus just being a very small part of what makes them. Yeah, I agree.
So you went to Vid Summit. You attended that recently. Would love to hear about how that went. Like I said, you're in the top 5% on YouTube. And so what have you learned from that event, that summit that you're applying today? And then what would be like the biggest learnings for you? I know you already talked on transparency, but in building your YouTube channel to what it is today, like any big takeaways, things that for people that are listening would love to know that you can share?
Well, when you think you're the top 5% and then you walk into a room where everybody has 2 or 3 million followers, you're just like, okay, I'm not really all that. And it's top 5% out of 300 million channels. So there's a lot of content out there, but most people don't succeed at it because the hardest part of the whole thing is the consistency and the skill set. Like, I didn't have the money to hire anybody to do everything when I first started because I was like, I don't even know if this is going to work. So I was only spending as I was making, like as I was selling courses or selling copies of Writing Compelling Fiction, I was like, okay, I'll invest more in the channel. That skill set of learning how to edit a video, as I'm sure you know, and learn how to master Canva and learn how to master SEO on YouTube and learn how to do all these things that the top YouTubers and social media people do is huge. It was such a steep learning curve, but I wish I did it 10 years earlier. I really do. Like I had a friend that kept telling me to do video 10 years ago, and I was like, nobody wants to watch me. If I had done it 10 years ago, it would be a totally different conversation. So that, and then always putting something out, it becomes a grind. It becomes a, like, I don't have anything else to say. I don't know if I've already done this. Like, I will literally forget what I've done when I put a video out. But trying to keep track of what people need to hear today, what they're going to need to hear tomorrow, and really being in tune with my audience and my community has been a big help. When people are saying, I need help with this or I need help with that, and responding to that has made
like
them
comments
really loyal.
on videos. And okay.
And like, I used to do this live stream where I would critique people's work and like tear it apart and fix it. That was super popular, and people really want me to bring it back. And I've got to figure out how I can do it along with, you know, this small job of running a production company and producing
amongst
great
other
content.
things. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I got to figure out where I'm going to fit that into my day. But there's been a big demand for that because people like that actual hands-on, this is how you do it kind of work. And those are the things that I think are hard to keep up with when you start doing social media and you have a job and you have a family and you have all these other things that you're doing. I'm still writing books. I just signed a contract with HarperCollins a couple weeks ago. And so I have a book due in like 6 months. And so I'm still doing all of that on top of everything else.
Consistency is so key.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, because you're not just saying that, you actually live it out. When we had talked about a recent event where we wanted to capture content and put some videos together, you're like, well, let's capture enough content to where we can continually share it, not just during the holiday season, but afterwards leading into Q1. Because there's this kind of continual growth that happens when people see you repeatedly putting out content. So yeah, I would agree with you on like consistency is huge.
When we sit down with a client or when I sit down with a ghostwriting client, I'm always like, what is your 5-year plan? Because if you're only focusing on this one product today, just getting this done and getting it out by April 2026, that's great, but it's not going to be a strategic plan. And you have to be strategic, particularly in creative fields, if you want to make money at it. Because so many people just do these creations because they're like, you know, excited about the creative process, which is great. But again, it's a business, it's an industry. So if you want to be there in 5 years, like I knew I wanted to be on a bestseller list. I knew I wanted to hit the USA Today and the New York Times list. How do I get there? What moves do I make? What kind of book do I write? Because really the only control I have is the quality of the words I put on the page. How do I do that and learn to be worthy of those? And that's all about really being strategic in every move that you make, every class that I took, every mentor that I worked with, every book that I read. I still read books, and one of my books here has a little marking in it because I used it to teach something on my channel. Every book I read, I try to think about, how did they do this? How can I learn from this? How can I take these skills and apply it to my own stuff? And I'm doing that with the clients that we work with here. I'm always looking at stuff I'm seeing elsewhere and saying, okay, how can we use this to strategically help Elite Rewards get to that next level? So when we sit down to talk about, well, we're just filming this event that we're having where we're helping kids for Christmas. All right, but we're not just going to do that. We're going to think about where we can go long term, because my goal is to help you grow. You talked about how like I'll have ideas and stuff, and a lot of business people are just like, well, don't share the ideas because then they'll go, you know, do it themselves. And I'm like, I don't really care, to me, success is a ladder. And if I'm climbing up, I always want to have one hand down to help the people that are coming along, because otherwise you get to the top and you're all by yourself, and that's no fun. So keeping all of this knowledge to myself is not helpful. It's just greedy and selfish. So if you come to us for a consult and I give you an idea, I'm not going to be sitting there with a little checkbox going, did you come back and have us film that? No, I'm just trying to help you succeed. And our goal is to always work with people that we like, that we would be friends with, that we would really genuinely want to see succeed. And so then the information is friendship and help. It's not just like, oh, let's try to get another X number of dollars out of this client.
Yeah.
There's a different goal and a different perspective here at this company than there is at a lot of other companies, I think.
Oh, I agree. I've heard Tommy, who's your business partner, say we want to do good business with good people.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to give him credit. I've used that myself. In fact, I think I said it on the last episode because I just love that statement. I think it's super important, especially when you are having those difficult conversations, or you are challenging somebody, or you are saying, hey, like, I hear your idea, but here's actually what could be better.
Right. Right. And Tommy is such a good person. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. He's a cheerleader. He's just so welcoming. This entire company, if you talk to anybody that works here, we are all like so stupid happy. We genuinely care about each other. And I think that translates to everything that we do at work. And we work so well together. Nobody's trying to like dictate anything else. And that creates a really good creative environment for a production company. So I think if you can learn to put your egos aside and do it for the better of the entire company and every single person that we meet, not just clients, then that karmic energy comes back to you tenfold.
Oh, 100%.
So.
In fact, to give you an example, when we've talked about different ideas that you brought to the table, and then you guys have reached out to us about different events, I've literally heard Tom on our team say, I want to help them out with that because they've done this for us.
Right.
So to your point, like there is this like, hey, we're bringing each other up together, and success is much greater, and it feels much better when you have other people that you've helped out or that have been, with you all along.
I thought it would be really fun and a challenge to you after seeing you work on the pizza with Jay if we wrote something together and saw how it turned out.
Okay.
So I wrote a little first line. I actually had ChatGPT do it, so I wasn't cheating and making it easy for myself. And it's triathlon themed so that we can just write for 5 minutes and then compare the results.
Okay.
And don't feel like you have to do the best work ever. You're not writing a Pulitzer Prize winning thing here. We're just doing 5 minutes of fun. So the starting sentence is, as the starting gun went off, he realized this race wasn't going to go as he expected. Okay, and let's go. Let me know when you're done.
Yeah, I got something put together.
Okay. So we're going to put these two on the screen, I think, and see how that goes, right? And just compare them. So you want to read yours?
Sure.
Go ahead.
All right. I had a lot of high expectations here. I don't know. All right. So as the starting gun went off, he realized this race wasn't going to go as he expected. Everything he had trained for and all the mental preparation he worked so tirelessly at perfecting was unrecognizable. His heart rate skyrocketed, his nerves were unsettling, and they took over. And now his focus wasn't about celebrating a finish. It was about trying not to drown. He started to think about all the things that could go wrong. What if I swallow water and choke? What if I get kicked in the face? What if my goggles fall off? What if an alligator attacks? What if I never see my family again? Is this worth it? Isn't it funny how sometimes the greatest physical battles tend to up being even greater mental hurdles? That's all I have.
I love it. I love it. We went in totally different directions, and we can see what kind of person Wes is compared to me, because his is much more emotional and deeper thinking. I kind of went in a different direction. As the starting gun went off, he realized this race wasn't going to go as he expected. A harsh gust of wind pushed at him, angry and cold. The woman beside him, clad in dark spandex tights and a bright pink tutu, elbowed her way closer to the front. I'm going to win this sucker. Stay out of my way, she grumbled as she planted one hoka on his big toe. Just as he went to push her away, something dark and dangerous began to churn in his stomach. To his right, the Krispy Kreme banner waved happily in the wind. He didn't have many regrets in life, but he already knew that third donut was going to be at the top of the list. Damn jelly-filled got him every time.
So interesting.
Yours is all like emotional and sweet, and mine's like
Yeah.
third donut.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking of it from like my own, I guess, kind of to what we had said earlier, like my own experience and like, what does that mean? And you were kind of factoring all these other characters and people and things. It's very interesting.
Right.
That was cool.
Yeah, it was. And I didn't do a triathlon. I did just a race, like a 5K.
And I just led into like an event that I can relate to that happened recently.
And that's the cool thing about creativity. It can go in a lot of different directions. We all have something to bring to the table. And I love that when I do this on my channel with live streams, like to see how people bring different things to the table with the exact same thought is just super fun and cool. And
one sentence and we went in completely different directions.
Exactly.
That was cool.
We show that I am a dark kind of sarcastic person and
I'm
Wes
emotional.
is the deep thinker. So maybe we should switch jobs.
That was awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thanks.
So perfect segue, because you accomplished something that you shared earlier. That I think it's less than actually 1%. I think it's like 0.01% of people have ever completed an Ironman or a half Ironman. And you also said just a few minutes ago that it's one thing to have a goal. It's another thing to create a strategy around it. And if you're going to complete a half Ironman or full Ironman, you have to have a strategy.
Yes.
It can't just be a goal. What I've found from my experience, I've done 2 halves. I'm doing a full next year, is that you learn so much more about yourself mentally and emotionally than you really do even physically. And so I'd love to hear first, why did you sign up? And then second, to do a half Ironman. And then second, what did you learn? And how did that extremely physical challenge shape you mentally and emotionally?
See,
so very loaded question.
Hopefully I don't cry in this. So a half Ironman, for those who are not in the 0.01%, is a 70.3, which is 70.3 miles completion of a 1.2 mile swim, 56 mile bike, and a half marathon. And when I told my dad I was doing one, he's like, so what, over like 3 days? I'm like, no, Dad, in less than 8 hours. You have a set period of time and you've got to do all 3 sports, one after the other. So about 10 years ago, I had gotten divorced. And after my divorce, my self-esteem was like 0. Like I really struggled with seeing any value. You know, I was older, starting over to date, and I was struggling financially. It was a really difficult time. And my friends had talked me into running, and I had started running, and running is really my therapy. Like when I don't run, I get very stressed very easily. It really does help me with that.
I agree.
And then they talked me into swimming. And swimming was the thing that I didn't want to do because my mom had taught me to swim by throwing me off the boat and saying, there's the shore. So this was in Massachusetts. I had seen Jaws at the drive-in. Like I knew what was in there. So I was terrified of the water, but I learned to overcome that and to swim. And then my friends got me on the bike, and at the time we were biking maybe 11 miles. That was our furthest distance. And they're like, we should do a half Ironman. And this was January and the half Ironman was September. I'm like, okay. Not even having any idea of the level of commitment of training and everything else. But as I started to train, and I was in this, like I said, really dark, poor, awful place. And a lot of things had happened that we're not going to get into on the podcast that had put me in a really difficult position. I was a single mom and I was really, really struggling hard. As I started clicking those miles up, right? And I started doing harder and harder things. Like I started riding in San Antonio, Florida with my friends every weekend.
Elevation. Yeah.
High elevation, high hills. And I remember coming down the hill by St. Leo's University at 37 miles an hour in a rainstorm and thinking, I'm kind of a badass.
Yeah.
We'll probably have to bleep that, but I'm kind of a badass.
You are. Yeah.
I was like, wow. And I was the girl that failed gym class, that would do anything to get out of gym class. I'm not especially coordinated. I just shared on one of my videos that I have fallen down the stairs at my dad's house 3 times as a full-grown adult, like not as a child, as an adult. I'm not very coordinated and athletic.
And for those, real quick, 37 miles per hour on your bike going downhill, it may not seem, I mean, maybe it seems fast to listeners, but it feels like you are in a torpedo.
It is.
And then if there's rain
scary.
coming down, it hurts as well.
Right?
Like, yeah, that's flying.
Yes, it was crazy. And then I swam at Lucky's Lake, which for those that don't know, it is a lake outside of Universal that is filled with alligators. And one of my friends said, let's swim across it because there's a swim every day there. And I got like to the middle and I realized I was alone and I was like, oh crap. And I swam really, really fast. But then I got out and I was like, I swam across a lake with alligators. Like, I'm kind of a badass, right? Like each of those things added up to where I ended up doing the half Ironman in Augusta, which is where you swim the Savannah River, also with alligators. And you just become this stronger, better person. But what it mostly taught me was that my value was not found in other people. My value was not found in my accomplishments. My value was found in me picking myself up off the floor and taking that next step when it was really hard and scary to take that next step. And that I could do hard things. And everything that I went through at that time period was extraordinarily hard. But I began to gradually see I can handle this. Mm-hmm. And one of my friends had come to me and said, well, I'm stressed about this. And, oh, I shouldn't share it with you because what you're going through is so much worse. I'm like, no. We all have the same burdens. They're just as hard to each of us. You know, when you're looking at what you're going through yourself, you just because mine has a little bit more of this on it than yours doesn't make it better.
Doesn't devalue it, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean any difference. As long as you pick yourself up and keep going. And that was the best thing I ever did because I went through, of course, hard times after that. I had plenty of things that would challenge me. But I'm like, hey, I swam with alligators. Hey, I came down that hill at 37 miles an hour. This is nothing. Mm-hmm. I can do this. So it brought me friendships. It brought me a strength. It brought me a great body for the beach for a little while there. But it mostly taught me that I was strong and capable, and there's really nothing in this world that I can't do. So that was the most important lesson. And by the time I got here to this business partnership with Tommy, I was a little worried. I'd never gone into business with anybody. I'd always owned my own. But, you know, I've said, you know what, I've done this, and I've seen him do that. We can make this work.
Yeah, so. I completely agree. There's so many small examples, whether it was through training or the actual race itself, that you look back at that kind of fuels you to take the next step forward when maybe prior to doing it, you would have second guessed it to a point where then you never actually move forward.
Right.
And I can share in the fear of Lucky's Lake. I've swam there as well. I had almost the same exact experience. Like, I wouldn't say I was halfway across. I think I was a couple 100 yards, and I just panicked and swam back and literally sat down on the bench on a little dock there and said, I don't know if I can do this. And had like a moment. And it wasn't, if my buddy didn't come back and say, you didn't come all this way to give up now. Like, just get back in the water and go again. And then and sure enough, went again and, you know, start settling, calm. And then, all right, that box was checked. Right. Okay. All right. Well then, and we were joking right before, you know, we started shooting this podcast about how like now it like leads to you wanting to take on bigger challenges and do harder things. And so,
but that's such a key message in life. You just get back in the water. You know what I mean? When you fall down, you just pick yourself back up. And so many people quit. Like, every run is hard. I love to run, but I mainly love having run. Like, running sucks after the first 0.2 of a mile. Like, in the beginning, I'm like, got my music. This is good. It's going to be easy. And then I get like a 1/4 mile in. I'm like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But not quitting and just keeping and going, even when it's hard, will teach you so much more about yourself than anything else. And that's exactly what you got to do. Just get back in the water. Just get back on the bike. Just get back out on the road, and it will all work itself out.
Yep. So much connection to business too. I have this question, and I labeled it "Success Leaves Clues," because we've talked about you writing a book for the first time and how that led to then you meeting Tommy, who then led to you starting your own building, you know, success production company, and then, you know, writing for a newspaper or magazine, and that leading to, you know, more and more things. You've had such a unique journey that has had like a profound ripple effect on a number of things. And so, how do you feel about everything that you have accomplished? And like, do you really view everything that you do as like, this is just a stepping stone to something else? Or do you just focus on what you have in front of you and let the chips fall where they may. Like,
well, charter member of Overachievers Anonymous, it's never where I want to be, right? It's never, I want to do it again, or I want to do it better, or I want to, come out with a stronger, better, more emotional book, or have the next client get 41,000 views. Like, it's that hunger, I think, is part of what makes entrepreneurs in general, and part of what makes you succeed in an industry where it is extraordinarily easy to quit. I can't tell you how many people I have met that want to write a book and never finish one. And just having that drive to want more, to be better, makes you constantly learning and hungry for more. And I think it keeps you from getting too cocky, because you're like, I can be better because look at how good this person is doing it, or I can reach this level because that person's doing that. And if anything will teach you to be humble, it is doing a triathlon. When you see these like people that are like 75, like I've done a couple triathlons with the Iron Nun, the like 95-year-old nun who does it. She's like blowing past me, and I'm like, she's like 90, and I'm just like huffing and puffing through the run.
Yeah.
That will humble you and teach you that there's room for improvement, but you've got to want it, and you've got to just keep getting back in the water and trying harder.
What's next for you? We're in December of 2025, so 2026 is right around the corner. What are you like really excited about?
Well, we're going to take Elite to a whole new level.
Of course.
Of course, next year. I don't know. Like I'm very much kind of whatever comes. Like I still want to write books for traditional publishers. I still want to do my channel. I still want to do these other things. But I've achieved a lot of the goals that I set out to have when I was young. So I'm not like as hungry for the accolade. Like I don't really care that much. As much as I would love to hit the New York Times list again, it's not that big a deal. But what I want to do is see more of an impact on my community, on the people that I work with, on the clients that we work with, and on the people that I teach. I really, maybe because I'm getting older, I'm feeling more that I want to have that legacy, that impact left behind. Not like where people are talking about me 20 years after I'm dead. Like, I don't care about that. I want them to say, I learned how to write a really great book because of this, or I saw my company become much more better known and take the lead in our niche because of this. That's where I really want to make a difference. It matters more to me now to see other people succeed, not just me.
Yeah. Last question. I've ended every episode with this question, but what would you say is your elite advantage?
So I saw that question when you sent them ahead of time, and I don't know. And I've seen all these other people answer it, and we've talked about it before. I really think it is just that I don't quit. I did have that one moment of quitting on myself, but I have never quit any other time as much as I wanted to. And there's always something more to be learned, to be achieved, to try, and being open to new experiences, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things, and not giving up when it gets hard, I think is what gives everybody an elite advantage, because it's so much easier to do the opposite, to just be like, yeah, it's too hard, I'm not going to do it. It's too much work, I'm not going to do it. Or I'm too old to learn how to edit videos. Like, all of those things can get in your way. But if you say, you know what, I can do hard things, and I'm just going to do them, then you can accomplish so much more than you ever dreamed in your life.
And you're living proof of that, which is awesome. So
again, a pretty high standard that I don't think I live up to. But no, you do. Every day I try a little bit more.
Well, this has been awesome. Shirley, thank you so much for taking time to connect with me. And like I said, be on this podcast. For those that are listening or watching, you can follow Shirley on YouTube at Writing Compelling Fiction. Mm-hmm. You can also connect with her on LinkedIn, and we'll put all the handles and ways that you guys can connect with either her individually, or if you're a company that's looking to take your brand to the next level, leverage an incredible production company. We'll also include some info there. Anything else I'm missing out, people?
I think that the team that I have is what makes everybody else look good. We didn't get to that, but the growth that you guys have been because we have amazing videographers, awesome amazing editors, amazing producers, and an amazing creative director. Like, it's not just me coming up with all these ideas, and I'm certainly not doing the editing or setting any of this up. Like, that's way beyond my skill set. But they are all coming together, and that team effort is what makes everybody grow. We have a genuine interest in helping everyone.
Your team's awesome. It really is. Yeah. Well, stay tuned for the next episode. We're really excited. We'll be announcing that shortly, but this has been awesome.
Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you. We didn't make a pizza, but we had fun.
Yeah, we did have a lot of fun. Appreciate it.